All right. Hello, Kevin. Thank you very much for being with us. I kind of feel like I've known you for a while, even though I think we met like a few days ago in the online universe. But
Yeah,
anyways,
thanks for having me.
I just want to tell the audience that we're going to get to know you because you're very active in the universe of podcasting and media and all that, which is always really cool. So you're a podcast brother. And not only that, you're a American guy who moved to Russia brother. So we've got that sort of
Yes.
second level sort of thing here. So let's start with that. I know, well, first question: how often do Russians ask you why you moved to Russia, and how strictly do they demand an answer from you?
I don't get asked a lot. Um, well, I
Oh,
shouldn't say I don't
really?
get asked a lot. I get asked, once or twice a week, but they expect an answer,
Mm-hmm.
and I give them the truth. I actually fell in love with Russia back when I was about 14. My biology teacher was a nun from St. Petersburg. And
Well, now that requires a little bit of background. How did you get a biology teacher that was also a nun? So did you go to like an Eastern Orthodox like private school or something, or how'd that happen?
I went to a private school that used to be a Catholic private school that converted to all faith. This was back in the
Um.
late 70s. And so they still had the nuns there, but they had a Methodist minister.
Oh.
And so that was their all faith, was the Methodist minister.
I don't mean to be kind of a jerk, but all faiths, there's a little bit of disagreement between them. That's interesting. When you were going to school, did you ever kind of listening to the religious opinions? Did you ever kind of notice that there were some pretty extreme differences between them?
Absolutely. Um, it was one of the things that led me down the road of, there's a lot of differences in all Western Christian faiths.
Mm.
The one that really blew my mind was because they still had all the nuns, they still had a priest there, is we had a Jewish kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always question the nuns whenever they would say something about Jesus. And he would get the rap on his knuckles with the ruler.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah. So this
Oh,
was the first year that they decided they would go all faith.
yeah.
And so over the years, they got more and more all faith. Then they sold to a nonprofit that now they welcome everybody.
Oh, I
So
see.
it took about 10 years for that transition to take place.
Well, yeah. Well,
But
in the
my
In Cle-
brothers and sisters all went to school there.
Well, I'll put it this way: as a form of sort of like self-segregation, a lot of Jewish people in Cleveland actually went to Catholic schools. Like there was never enough of a.
Yep.
There was one actual Jewish school, okay, but I think it was like really expensive and had limited numbers. So there were a
Hmm.
surprising amount of Jewish people that went to Catholic school just because like the environment was safe, and obviously if you go to a private school and you really misbehave, you get thrown out. So that's what they went for, which I
Yep.
always found very bizarre. Even though I guess maybe technically it's a safer, better learning environment, but whatever. Well, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I lack wisdom. Then again,
Well, this was
if
in yeah, this was in Duluth, Minnesota, and
oh
all the Italian kids went there.
oh I see.
So
Oh,
um,
that's not surprising. So,
yeah,
all right.
so
Okay, so you had this is a very interesting thing. So, what did this one particular nun sort of show you or tell you that was so amazing? Because, we have a lot of teachers growing up, but it always seems like there's always a sort of one super teacher that really changes someone's life. For me, that was Dr. Franks, who was a doctor of political science, who happened to teach
uh
like about politics at a high school in the ghetto. By some, the stars aligned for me. So, how did this nun and what? And by the way, what was her name? And what did she do for you,
Sister Beverly.
Beverly? Okay.
And I liked science to begin with, but she would often share what her life was like in St. Petersburg.
Mm-hmm.
And she shared photos, what the culture was like. And it really struck a chord with me because, I grew up in the era of, Russia is communist. The whole Soviet Union was considered Russia.
Yeah.
And, they were communists. They were bad. Their news was all propaganda. But she shared the truth about it in a gentle way for those students that were interested. Now, myself and, believe it or not, the Jewish kid were the ones who spent a lot of time with her after class, listening to what her life was like and what the people were like. And, I really learned from her and got from her that people all over the world are the same if you pull the governments out of it. They all want the same thing. They want a better life for their kids. They want a good life for themselves. And, of course, it's a Catholic school. So the definition at that time of a good life was, the eternal soul and living, according to conservative values. And, so that's kind of what started me on my love for Russia. So I started studying the history and the culture. And, I kept doing that for years until I met my wife, 2006, February 24th. And it was a stray phone call. I was managing a software team in Silicon Valley. And one of my employees was visiting his mother in Ukraine, and I made a phone call to him, and I dialed the phone number wrong.
Oh.
And at 3:00 in the morning, her time, I got, a Ukrainian woman in Dnipropetrovsk with a sweet little hello. And,
what?
Yeah. And I was surprised. I said, "Oh, hi, who is this? Is, so-and-so there?" And she spoke back to me in perfect English.
Oh.
Turned out she was an English professor at the most prominent English language university in Dnipropetrovsk.
Oh.
And we talked for about 3 hours. She saw it as an opportunity for her to practice her English. Well, now I had her phone number, so I kept annoying her.
I see.
And yeah, and she would talk to me for hours about everything and anything. And, we got to know each other. And May 8th of 2006, I arrived in Kiev at the airport, and she met me. And she was in the background of the crowd of people waiting to greet people, jumping up and down and waving. And, she showed me around Kiev. She took me to Dnipro. And, things kind of went from there.
Oh, I see. But then that kind of also begs a question. So did you sort of then move to start immigrating to Ukraine, and then you were in the Crimea, and the Crimea got cut off from the rest of it, and so now you're in Russia? Or did something lead both of you guys to come here? I'm kind of thinking already from a legalistic standpoint. How did this all work out?
Well, she brought me to Crimea the first time in September 2006, and I fell in love with it. So when I went back to the States, I told her, you know what? She was living with her mother at the time, and I said, you go find a place in Crimea and I'll buy it, because she loved it here too. So she looked around, didn't find what she liked. We visited quite often. I probably traveled to Ukraine, and we went to Crimea 6-7 times a year. I was constantly in Ukraine visiting her. So back in 2014, we were here when, things changed over. So I can speak for the fact that they had a valid referendum. The people voted. There weren't people at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And, but we were still going back and forth. Well, her mother decided she was going to move here and take Russian citizenship. So she came to us and she said, I found this apartment. Can you help me buy it? We did. And then she found another one next door, a bigger, nicer one. And she came to us and said, will you help me upgrade the apartment? This is where I learned that when you marry a Russian or a Ukrainian, you marry the whole family.
Outside of Moscow, but yeah. outside of the big
Yeah,
city. Here, everything's
yeah,
kind of more like America, and why it doesn't really work very well. But yeah.
yeah. Well, I married my wife's cousin who lives in Moscow too. So,
Mm-hmm.
I would get the requests of, "Gee, I need an iPhone. Can you buy me one? I'll reimburse you." And I'd send her the phone, and then she'd send the money to my mother-in-law and
Oh,
say,
she
"Well,
actually
we're all
did
family."
reimburse you. Wow, I thought she just sort of looked at you like a Daddy Warbucks there. So,
Well, she didn't reimburse me. She gave it to my mother-in-law and then justified it as, "Well, we're family. We're supposed to help family."
oh,
So,
that's interesting. Okay, that's
yeah. And
abstract. All right.
I get it from my wife's brother now. He is stuck in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
but yeah.
so what is he doing? Just every day trying to just dodge the draft, or what? Or is he really old?
No, he's what, 28?
Oh
So
no.
he's dodging the draft. He's living at a friend's mother's house,
Yeah.
and but he goes to work every day. He
Oh
works in a
man.
cell phone store selling cell phones, and I don't know how they haven't caught him there.
Oh man. That's
But
that's that's
yeah,
that's a that's terrible. I pray for him. That's this is a
yeah,
real bad
thanks.
situation. Let's hope this ends soon for his sake, so
Yeah,
he can live his life, whether it be in some sort of rump Ukraine state or whatever's going to happen, as long as he gets to live.
whatever happens, yeah.
So man,
He
that's tough.
he's of the belief, from the propaganda, Ukraine will be, the victors, and we're of the belief that Dnipropetrovsk will end up being part of Russia.
Well,
But
is that in the sense that he's actually like sort of the pro-Ukrainian fascism, or he's just only heard one side of what's happening and that's his interpretation?
well, when the whole thing started last February, he was very pro-Ukrainian, fascist. He had his knuckles tattooed,
Mm-hmm.
and over a few months, he started realizing that maybe he had made a mistake.
Yeah.
He gets information from his mother, from my wife, from me. So he's changed his viewpoints somewhat, but he's still a Ukrainian patriot who only gets one side of the story.
I see. Well, that's too bad, but we still hope
Yeah.
he'll survive, so that way he'll have time to reflect and maybe have a change of
Yep.
heart. Maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because you could also think of it that the Banderites have had like 80 years to have a change of heart, and they haven't. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, so that's one thing. Speaking of Banderites, so anyways, could you tell us about sort of the podcasting stuff that you're actually doing, and have the Banderites come for you? Because I could imagine, especially as an American in Crimea who has views that would be overall maybe considered pro-Russian, you're probably on the Mirotvorets list.
I am not on the Miratorvitz list yet.
Ooh.
I was warned by, one of my very special friends here, to avoid taking sides in the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I do anyway because, we have family there. My wife has good friends there. I have friends there in Ukraine. And we have family and friends in Russia as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
I don't take a hard stance either way, at least publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have defended the Ukrainian people against Scott Ritter at times. I debated him a month or two ago where
Mm.
he said there are no good Ukrainians.
Oh,
And
well, that's a little bit hyperbolic, yeah.
yeah, so I try to take that attitude. So what I have had is I've had Western NAFO trolls come after me for my articles. I
Mm.
write information warfare articles on Substack.
Yeah.
I do have a podcast called American in Crimea,
Mm-hmm.
and I get them in the comments there quite a bit.
Oh boy, with a name like that, I'm sure they don't even care what you said. They're just gonna drop those bombs every day.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah.
Usually what I hear is, the Tatars are going to slit my throat. Of course, the best neighbor I've got is a Tatar leader in the area.
Of course,
And
of course.
yeah, and the Ukrainians are going to come to Crimea, liberate it, take away everyone's property, and kill anyone who's a Russian citizen. And but more often what I get is from reasonable people in the podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
those who are willing to look at the truth, who ask me, why aren't you afraid? Well, this wouldn't be a popular comment for the Banderites,
Yeah.
but it'll be a cold day and, HE double hockey sticks before Russia gives up Crimea. It
Yeah.
isn't going to happen. We'll have World War III before that will happen.
Well, yeah, and
So,
also, dude, we can't live in fear. Like the thing
yeah,
is, there are a lot of people who actually do live in fear, and it just essentially, I'll put it this way, it doesn't work. Like there's for a lot of people, they sort of have this idea that if you just always sort of go with the flow, that you'll be like exempt from all this political whatever, that you'll be able to make it, and it doesn't really work that way.
nope.
Being politically submissive, it just doesn't work. It's kind of hard to explain, but you'd think that it's sort of like with Lukashenko is a good example. He was always sort of like, well, I'm going to kind of like hint that I'm going to go to the EU, but then I'm going to go to the Moscow and say we're an ally, and I'm going to play both sides, and everything's going to be awesome. Nursultan Nazarbayev in Kazakhstan said he wanted to play all three sides between Russia, America, and China, that Kazakhstan was going to be this balancing point of the great civilizations of the world, and somehow that would make Kazakhstan super rich and super important, right? It doesn't work. Like they when you are dealing with one side that has extreme beliefs, they don't care. And sometimes even if you are on their side, they don't care. And that's
Yeah.
with Lukashenko. He did a lot of butt kissing in the EU. Didn't matter. They still tried to overthrow him. You know?
Yeah, I see Erdogan has the same problem in Turkey. He tries to sit on the fence. And,
Yeah.
I have this saying that if you sit on the fence long enough, you're either going to fall to one side or the other, or you're going to fall in the middle and hurt yourself.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. And they tried to overthrow him, too, with that whole,
Yeah.
whatever the name of that park was, sort of like Micro Maidan that didn't really succeed. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And the U.S. has given him unending trouble over the giant Muslim temple that they're building in Simferopol.
Yeah.
And he's gone there. He's visited it. So, the whole F-35 thing. And he's like, well, okay, I'll buy from Russia then.
Oh, okay. Well, so they're building, you're saying a temple in Simferopol for
A mosque.
a mosque.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the largest mosque in, well, I don't know the whole area. It's the largest one in Crimea anyway. It's
Yeah.
giant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, actually,
It's
Turkey
been
has
under
also built.
construction for, yeah, about 5 years now. It was supposed to be finished 2021, but, COVID and everything, it got delayed.
Well, yeah, Turkey's done a pretty good job of sort of using like Islamic soft power, because I forget how many of them, but in Chechnya there are like a 3 or 4 like really really impressive mosques, like the kind of architecture that's so impressive that you like put it on T-shirts and stuff, like that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
believe that half or maybe more, but not all, were somewhat in participation with Turkey. Like they really want to
Yeah.
get that soft power influence into
Hmm.
Chechnya. And if you look in like Central Asia, pretty much all the Central Asian countries have like a Turkish Kyrgyz or Turkish Kazakh or Turkish whatever university and a few other mosques and all that stuff. So Turkey's doing okay with their soft power spending. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. But now,
This mosque is like that. It's awesome architecture.
no,
But but going back to me being here as a Russian citizen, um, you know, after 2014, I kept telling my wife, like, well, I want to retire there. I said, gee, why should we put an extra, $10,000-15,000 into an upgrade for an apartment when your mother, she's one woman, she doesn't need a 4-room apartment.
yeah.
So we bought it for ourselves.
Mm,
And
mm-hmm.
we started coming over here regularly. My mother-in-law got ill in 2019. No, 20. When did COVID start? 21, 20. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she got ill in 2019. My wife came over in January to take care of her. I flew to Russia on the day that Russia closed the borders. So I arrived at 6:30 in the morning.
Boy, did you make it on time.
I did. I arrived at 6:30 in the morning. They closed the borders at 8 a.m.
Whoa.
So You know,
Whoa.
I called where I was working. I said, you know, COVID, I'm stuck here. You guys are working remote anyway. And they said, well, okay. I didn't tell them exactly where I was.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
told them Russia. And so I worked here through COVID, and we during 2020 we bought 9 by 10 plots of land next to each other and started building
10
a
by 10, do you
house.
mean like 10 sotkas?
10 sotkas
Okay. Yeah, that's oh my gosh. For
or
the
9
international
sotkas.
audience, that's like
Yeah,
one sotka is 100 square meters, so 10 would be then 1,000 square meter plots.
1,000 square meters. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a pretty decent size. I in Chekhov I have 1,200 square meters, and I'm very happy with that sort of plot. It's big enough where you feel the space, but it's not so big that mowing it makes you want to just commit suicide.
Yep. And we did what you did. There was a house on it, a small house,
Yeah.
and you know, the guy who owned the property had burned it down in a drunken stupor and is running his banya stove in the house, and
Mm-hmm.
we just repaired it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, there you go. So is that where you
Yeah.
are now? Maybe it's none of my business, but I see you are sort of, it looks almost like you're in a German style house that are very popular in Russia, where the second floor has like the big windows and the big open space, kind of like an open space attic almost. Is that where you're at?
Yeah. My office is on our third floor, the mansard,
Ooh,
and
third floor.
all
Wow.
the first, second, and third floor has all, you know, the big glass floor to ceiling windows,
Yeah.
because we're on the side of the hill looking down over the Black Sea. We're right behind Vorontsov Palace.
Yeah, and
So we
also
see the palace in the
you don't
park.
get nearly as cold as here, because sometimes they build houses like that up here, and I understand that they'll say, well, if the glass is 80 millimeters thick, it'll be fine. It's like I don't believe it. I just never do. The glass always feels really cold when you're near it, like just you can feel the coldness coming off it. But where you're at, that kind of construction method's probably awesome.
Yeah, and ours are about 30 millimeters, the
Yeah,
glass. It's triple pane glass.
yeah.
Um, but I built it like an American from the north. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, so Siberia of America.
Mm-hmm.
So we used the 25 centimeter blocks and insulated the outside, put 10 centimeters of wood framing inside, insulated that.
Oh
Um,
man.
so the house stays warm in the winter with, we have heated floors,
Ooh,
and
that's
it's
always
enough
nice.
for here. Yeah. And in the summer, it stays cool.
All right. Oh, awesome, man. I'm actually kind of jealous. I'm definitely looking to upgrade the house, but unfortunately, I also had some obligations to the kids, to the future generation of Kirby's, and so I kind of spent my money that I built up over the last year on buying with a mortgage an apartment in Moscow proper.
Yeah.
In fact, very close to downtown, if not in downtown. So it looks like the house upgrade's gonna have to wait. Although I really want to live in a much bigger house, but one day. So, anyways,
Well,
Kevin, while we're here,
and
what are some of the main topics you talk about on your podcast? Like, what is your shtick here? I mean, as this American in the Crimea, because you say you're trying to be a little bit more neutral politically, but as an American in Crimea, that's kind of very hard to be politically neutral. What's your kind of
yeah,
podcast
well,
about?
the name American Crimea came about only because it's the only name that I could get consistently across all the platforms.
Oh,
YouTube would not allow American in Crimea, which is the name of the channel.
hmm,
Um, and Outlook wouldn't allow America Crimea. So it
interesting.
was just kind of juggling it. I got approval from our friends to use that name, as long as the titles and everything are all American in Crimea. We talk about our life here. We show people that things are normal here and the people are normal here.
Mm-hmm.
We show, the construction work going on. We visit the palace and the parks and, the beach. We post videos about all that. So if you really want to learn about Crimea and how the people, the businesses are here, that's what we do. Now, when we go to a place like Krasnodar or Moscow, we post videos from those trips as well, just to show that, you know, life is normal here. It's not what you hear in the Western media. Um, People here are fantastic. There is no, Americophobia here.
Yeah.
People are interested. They find out I'm American, and some of the times they ask why I moved here, but more often it's they want to hear about America. And, we tell them the truth. Here's the benefits my wife saw. Our daughter went to school in the United States, and she was happy that, she didn't get poisoned in the cafeteria at lunchtime like, they did in Ukraine. But there's a lot of negatives as well. My wife got up at 7 o'clock every morning, worked as a nurse till 6 p.m., came home and was too tired to do anything 6 days a week. I was doing the same thing. Our daughter, she went off to university. She's studying, Russian culture and international relations. So she's a bit of a fighter herself over there. But our goal was to just show people that life is normal here.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I think, because in America we have this kind of type of person. Maybe our younger viewers might not know who this person is and even is, but I think the sort of atypical kind of guy was like the Rush Limbaugh, like the very jingoistic, blowhard kind of patriot. And in Russia, you don't really encounter that type of person. They have to be here
Right.
just mathematically, but there don't seem to be that many of them that are just like, yeah, or like, for example, you remember like the whole lead up to the Iraq War. Like every sane
Yeah.
person was like, look, whatever happened with those two towers, it didn't really seem connected with Iraq, guys. What are we doing? We can't just kill all these people because it's not the picture isn't lining up. It doesn't matter. We've got to stop weapons of mass destruction. We got to take them out. Gosh darn Arabs. But you don't. That was very. I'll put it this way. There seemed to be a critical mass of those people in America. Enough of them. Even I don't think they're the majority. There were sort of enough of them to kind of be loud enough to make it seem like public opinion was in favor of this. Whereas in Russia, you really rarely meet that kind of guy. Like, I don't know.
I agree. I don't meet people, people here are concerned about the conflict in Ukraine, but you don't hear them going around talking about it. They don't badmouth Ukrainians. They don't badmouth, the military. I don't see much of that at all. It's kind of like, oh, well, this happened? Really? It isn't a top of mind thing for people.
Well, yeah, that's actually a little bit surprising because here in Moscow, I think people are a little bit more angry at Ukraine. But again, they also sort of understand that it's really a messy situation, and also because if you want to talk about like the Russian propaganda has generally, for the most part, told the public that there's sort of been this process of brainwashing of people in Ukraine. So I think the overall narrative is that they are, not the Western Ukrainians. The Western Ukrainians are something else. But the rest of people in Ukraine, outside of Galicia or whatever, Galicia, are basically Russians who are either our people and understand it, or are our people who've been brainwashed. So that also kind of makes it a little bit less sort of black and white. They're the enemy, we're not, because maybe they might technically be the enemy, but they're actually our guys that have been brainwashed. And it also sort of explains why we talked about Scott Ritter earlier. It kind of goes back to some of the things he said about why the special military operation looked the way it did, because the objective wasn't to go in there and just smoke people.
Exactly.
Especially
And my impression of what's going on in Ukraine, Western Ukraine, is it tends to be the older people, the former Soviets, who tend to get brainwashed quicker. And the 30, 40 something people tend to be the ones who, look at reality but keep their mouths shut. And then you've got the younger ones that tend to be the Banderites.
Oh, of the Ukrainian side, you mean?
Of the Ukrainian side.
Oh,
Now, in Crimea, I don't think you get a lot of the talk about it because, it's a mix of Tatars, Russians, and Ukrainians here.
Yeah.
Your Ukrainian cars are all over the place.
Yeah.
I see in Western media, the vocal few from Ukraine talking about, separation from their family. You can't go there, but they're all over the place.
Well, one thing is then, this is just the mechanisms of things. How could someone drive from the greater, the core of what Ukraine is at the moment? How could they get a car to the Crimea? Like, how do they even get there?
Well, for the last year, you can't.
Okay.
Before that is what would happen is you just go to the border with a Ukrainian passport at the border control. You just showed it to the border guard and they let the Ukrainians in. People that are Ukrainian that live here that have taken Russian citizen all keep their internal Ukrainian passport. So if they want to go to Ukraine, they get in the car, they drive up and they get to the Ukrainian border control, they show their internal passport and they say, oh, okay, and they let them in. Coming back, they use, that to get past Ukrainian border control, then they switch to the Russian passport to the Russian side.
Well, yeah, and from what I understand, when at some point after the war started, they basically said that anyone has Ukrainian citizenship that wants to make the jump to Russian citizenship is excluded from all the migration quotas, and they can just apply and do it, which is pretty crazy, and also again shows a very different dynamic of the war. Like during Afghanistan, I don't think the United States ever said everyone who's Afghanistan, you're now our guys. You come over, American citizenship automatically. All you have to do is apply. That didn't happen.
Yeah. And of course, Russia's been making it easier to immigrate over the years. They're in the process of changing the laws again for Westerners who want to come here. Mm-hmm. I've seen a big difference between my wife taking her citizenship in 2020 and me getting mine. I actually got my citizenship in January.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, that was not too long ago. So congratulations, that was a very recent, and that must also be a relief because especially if everything is in your name, it's much better if it's in your name and you have Russian citizenship when it comes to private property. At least the way the trend is kind of going right now. But anyways, Kevin, I actually have to run very soon. So is there anything you want to tell our audience? Any pitches you want to throw? Hype your programs so you could get some new, fresh, passionate subscribers, or anything you want to tell us? Any final words?
Well, if you want to hear about life in Crimea, go to YouTube or Rumble and find the channel America Crimea, mm-hmm. American Crimea. And, if you're on Substack, American in Crimea has a Substack page. And I also do information warfare articles. So kmichelizzi.substack.com will get you into my information warfare area, which was my background. And of course, I have a new podcast with Deborah L. Armstrong, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. our time and 9 a.m. Pacific in the U.S.
Yeah, because Deborah's here too, right?
Deborah was here, but she lives in Washington now.
Oh, I see.
So she talks about her former Soviet life in Leningrad.
Oh, man.
And, I do some comparisons to what we do here. We have different guests that we've got lined up to bring on. So just people to, compare life before and after, history, culture, things like that.
All right. Well, very good. Well, anyways, Kevin, I'm going to hit that fantastic red record button right now. Guys, remember, go check out Kevin's stuff. And if for some reason you're not subscribed to the Tim Kirby Russia universe, why don't you go to my Telegram? Why don't you subscribe to this channel so you can get more interesting interviews and all things related to Russia, both good and bad. Anyways, Kevin, talk to you soon.